Hello.
Great.
I am late.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Housing First Subcommittee meeting is now commenced. It is November 28th at 4:06 p.m. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so that we can track quorum. Also, to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. So Tisha Tallman's here. Mindy Bernstein.
Here.
Mark Clark. Got to unmute, Mark.
Present.
Thank you. And Wendy Asher is not present today. So we'll go ahead and do a call to audience. Any audience members have anything to say?
No one's raised their hand, Tisha.
No one's raised their hand? Okay. The next meeting agenda item is approval of the October minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the October minutes? I see some head nods, yes. If there's any objection to approval of the October minutes, please say aye. Okay, it looks like there are no ayes. October minutes have been approved. The next agenda item is Housing First update. If we could have a member of the city speak on behalf of the update. That's how, is there someone designated by the city of Tucson to do that update today for the Housing First program?
For the properties?
Well, first, the agenda item is for.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'm a little, yeah, no real update. We, the housing department has sent out, is expecting some applications this week for 3 new positions for the choice implementation grant. That's the restoration remodeling of the Tucson house, the very large project that we have coming up. So we hopefully will have some new members of the team to help shepherd this very large project through. That's all I have right now.
Thank you, Neto. And then the next agenda item is by request of a commissioner on the presentation of city-owned vacant parcels. We can have a member of the city present on that item.
Yes, hello, subcommittee members. My name is Sarah Megason. I think you know me from various other presentations I've given to the commission. I'm going to give a presentation. Mindy had requested to come up with a list of all city-owned property that's vacant. And so it is a task to do such a thing. And so I'm going to walk through a presentation that I created a year ago that we've also kind of added to as well. And to give you kind of the landscape of what we have in the city. It's an exhaustive list of 400 properties, right? Not all of them are conducive to things, you know, some are in floodplain, some are designated as water sites, right? Like just because there's a vacant city lot doesn't mean that it can be built on. We have a lot of parcels that are really small and a lot of parcels that are really big and a lot of parcels right by the airport, right? So, you know, you hear this number and you think, wow, let's build on all of them. But then you get into the weeds and you start to succumb to reality of what, you know, is on site and kind of what our restraints are and our constraints are. So I'm going to share my screen and give this PowerPoint presentation.
Could the PowerPoint presentation be sent?
Yep,
Okay, thank you.
yep, definitely.
My brain doesn't read things on computers and retain things. It has to
Yeah,
be.
of course. I'll definitely send this along. And I can also share, you know, a spreadsheet of all of the data, right, for you to dive into. And I can kind of talk about a couple of other places if you want to do your own research on stuff like this, kind of where you can access all that. So just giving this quick update, I had created a presentation just like this for city leadership staff, right? Liz and Ann last year. I was tasked with analyzing all of the single family, like residential parcels that we have. So that's how this initially was created. And then we've added on to kind of just look at all parcels in the city. So the vacant lots owned by the city of Tucson really just looks at those that are owned by the city of Tucson. I broke it out into 4 categories based on size. So there's parcels that are less than 3,600 square feet, which if it's less than 3,600 square feet, it's really hard to build on. There's not a lot of space to get a lot done. Even, you know, building small homes is really hard on 36 and below. 3,600 to 500 square feet. So we call those typically non-conforming lot sizes. So those are like, you know, just a little bit less than what's allowed in our residential zoning districts. I have between 5,000 and 11,000 square feet, and then I have over 11,000 square feet. When we get into the data is always fun, right? It's not easy, it's not great, it's just not great data sometimes. It's the assessor data, it's Pima County data, it's based off of years of adding different codes and things like that. So vacant parcels are hard because it'll come up as vacant, but there's actually a house on it. And you don't know that until you go and you do sort of site-by-site analysis. And I've tried to figure out why that is. I don't get the best answers other than it's not great. So it's a little frustrating. I think they focus more on like non-jurisdictional land use description codes and things like that, you know, for the public so that there's more correct. But it's the one thing I noticed about the data when I sifted through a lot of this. So ultimately, you know, to sift through all of the properties that the city owns, it ends up becoming kind of a lot by lot analysis to discover actual vacant parcels and then whatever the development potential could be on those sites. So just as a snapshot, I kind of go through all 4 of these on each of their own slide. So the small lots to start off with, these are less than 3,600 square feet. They're really too small to be developed on. Potentially could be an opportunity. You know, one thing that I presented to staff and Anne and the directors and everybody is this could be a potential source for revenue generation, you know, just or helping people buy lots that might be next to their home, you know, to advance their own needs for their housing and additions, etc. Albany County Land Bank does that for like small remnant parcels that exist to sort of give it to the community in some capacity. So there's 400 of those. Ultimately, 47 of those are labeled as vacant in the system. 17 of those 47 are the Westmoreland lots, which we're planning on developing out with the single family home ownership. And we did have an interested purchaser and was able to convey a parcel to a landowner adjacent to help them add on to their home and, you know, sort of do that to generate some funds for us. So those are vacant parcels that show up in the list of vacant parcels that the city owns. The next category I called non-conforming lots. So these are between 3,600 and 5,000 square feet. You know, I put in a picture of a lot in the barrio south of downtown that is actually a really small lot that had a house built on it. So there's development potential for these from a single family perspective. There's really only 3 that are vacant in the data after I kind of scanned and scoured all of the sites. Another thing you'll notice on these sheets is it talks about unassigned apartments or HCD. There's also many more parcels that exist that the city owns that I didn't really include because they're Tucson water sites or they're Department of Transportation sites. And so other city departments have sort of control over what is happening with their parcels that are designated to them. So you can see I call out which ones are unassigned and which ones are assigned to HCD that we own, and then breaking it down a little bit further so that there's really only 3 vacant lots that are between these 2 sizes. Once again, I was originally doing this just for single family development, but I think it lends to a good inventory of what we have. So this is between 5,000 and 11,000 square feet. These would be all lots that would meet minimum lot size requirements in our residential zone districts. There was only, well, there were 33 that I found that were vacant, but 2 that were potentially developable. And, you know, these sites are also just like single family lots scattered inside of existing neighborhoods, etc. So, you know, just interesting to see what we have there as well. A lot of these sites end up being actually Tucson water well sites. And so when you look at the data, it comes up, but then you go get to it and you realize there's a wellhead and it's just a Tucson water well site. So once again, it's kind of hard to just pull it like you think you're getting this great info, but once you distill it down, it's not as much as it may have appeared to be, but you know, also like the constraints of where they are and how they exist.
Sarah, there were 2 different groups of vacant on that slide. What was the difference between the 2 of them?
Whether it was in an unassigned
Okay.
department or if it was HCD.
Yeah, I see.
And I haven't quite figured out what unassigned department means. I can continue to ask that question of our real estate team. You know, I've learned a lot about the city of Tucson real estate division, right? And they hold their own inventory of all of this, right? And they have history. How did we get these properties, you know, and all the sorts of stuff. So I'm not quite sure yet what unassigned means, but to me, it seems like that's something that HCD could say, hey, we want to be assigned to those if it works for housing in some capacity.
So curious, what is the origin of the HCD assigned properties? Are they like adjacent to scattered site housing acquisition, things like that?
Yep. Yeah. I think so. And then whatever random decision that was made at some point in time to acquire a certain property, etc. Most of it is like adjacent to scattered site, from what I've found, or is our scattered site, right? Like, or some of these say that they're vacant, but they're not, and there's a home on it. So because I think it's government property, I'm not 100% sure why the assessor doesn't change the land use description or whose job it is to change the land use description. But that was one thing I found on a lot of the lots that I would try to pull up. There would be something on it. It was just miscategorized.
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious. It seemed to me, although I haven't spent any time down there lately, but it seemed there was a fair amount of vacant land around RFK homes in South Park. You know what I'm talking about?
I think so. And what I'll do after this is I'll pull up the map and we can kind of go on the aerial and I'll show you the layer that exists publicly so that, you know, if ever there's like some question you have to try to drill down, we can hopefully get to that solution. And then the large lots, which is over 11,000 square feet. And then just for reference, because when we talk in square foot versus acreage, an acre is 46,000 square feet, I think, or something like that. 52, I forget. I had it memorized earlier, and then today has been so busy, I literally Googled it. But anyway, so when we're talking about 11,000 is not an acre yet. And we're just trying to see kind of the just larger lots that do exist. There for HC, and then the other thing that there's some data that we have that says something's HCD owned, but it's actually not. That was something we discovered this week as well. So once we drilled into it, we realized there's really only one large lot that HCD owns that's designated to them, assigned to them right now. And it's the Mojave Navajo site, which there's plans for development on that site moving forward right now. So, you know, once we kind of got into it, there's not a lot of opportunity, but there is. It's just, it is constrained, and you think it sounds great. We have 400 plus city-owned vacant parcels for a quick data scrub, but the drill down proves that it's a lot more, it's not as opportunistic as we would hope that it would be.
Sarah, just another question. It seemed to me that we looked at, I know the county had done some similar activity about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't their list also include a few city parcels, or do I misrecall that?
Their list included Pima County owned parcels that are inside of the city of
Okay,
Tucson.
all right.
Yep. Yep. So they had, and then the same thing with their sites, especially the ones that were within the city limits, were constrained by zoning and things like that. So they were trying to put their parcels out for RFP, and we discovered that, yeah, you can put an SH zoned parcel out there for development, but you can only build 2 houses on it per the zoning. And, you know, what are you trying to get? Sort of, they're still working through how they're going to release that RFP, right, Mark? We haven't done that yet. So,
Yeah, I don't think so.
so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen real quick. I'll make sure to get this PowerPoint to you all for sure, so that you have the numbers and you can kind of look at the breakdown of it. And then I'm gonna reshare my screen just to show, and this will just be kind of like a quick lesson in Map Tucson. Always happy to set up a call to walk through this with people at a separate time. But Map Tucson is our public facing map system, and it does have a lot of this information accessible to the public. So if you Google Map Tucson, it pops up. We can share the link, but ultimately it's our GIS Map Tucson. It'll pop up. I usually toggle on the aerial, which is down at the bottom. Don't get too bogged down on this right now. I just want to show there is a government property layer inside of Map Tucson. So when you open Map Tucson, it'll kind of show, and it'll look more like this. And there's a disclaimer, and then you can open the layer list through the disclaimer. So when I open government property, there's these little pluses and minuses, and you can drill it down to like just look at City of Tucson property, and it'll come up with all these polygons on the screen. So you see all the bright colors. If it's green, that's parks. So you can see who owns, you know, Reed Park, and we have a mountain, and all the parks that you see in green. HCD is pink. So you will see pink for all of the city of the housing and community development parcels. So here we have the why am I spacing the name?
Posadas or Posada Sentinel?
Yeah,
No.
Posadas de Sentinel. Yep. That, and again, like once the afternoon hits, all the words disappear from my brain. So so pink, pink is HCD. And so you can see, but there was something that popped up today. Lena and I were looking at and really perplexed because these 3 pink parcels show up, and it looks like it's right over the highway, but really it's the parcels underneath Keno Parkway, and those are actually DTM. They're not HCD. So at some point maybe they were HCD, and then DTM ended up taking over for the, you know, who knows what, and then it just never got corrected in the data. So there's some data issues that come up in this sort of effort, but you can see all the different colors. And I think it's important to I look at this all the time. I try to figure out who owns what. A lot of it is DTM remnants from road widenings, right? So we have a lot of parcels along Broadway or Grant where, you know, we have widened the road and have leftover bits of parcels. So this is accessible to anybody to go and peek at whenever they feel nerdy and want to nerd out on the map and dive into, what the government property is. And knowing that it's not perfect data, right? And I think that's what the disclaimer sort of states about Map Tucson, is that this is the best that it has, but also, there's the terms and conditions are really like that. None of this is said to be known as fact and hard evidence and true, and your property lines aren't where they are, right? Like, so Map Tucson's a tool that we can use, but it's not always correct. But it's been good to go take a look at it and see what we own, where we own it, and to get a sense for that. So Mark, you were talking about South Park.
Yeah, south of 36th.
And the other thing I like to do is turn on my labels for aerials. Like over on the other side of the
No, right at 36th and south of 36th on Park.
on Park.
Or maybe north of 36. You see where all that pink stuff is?
Yep. So what I like to do too is to toggle my view down.
Oh, yes, there you go. Houses.
Yep, so there's houses there. There's some lots that I think this one's probably vacant. I think I've looked at that one before. So yeah, a lot of these are the South Park Villas projects that was a rent to own development that the city did probably 15 to 20 years ago. And so some of them are still housing owned, city owned, but they're going to be sold to the homeowners. It was a rent to own program.
Was that the Hope 6, RFK Hope 6?
That is a great question. Because I don't know the answer.
Robert F. Kennedy Homes was.
Okay.
They were these weird little 2-story fourplexes that had circular, I loved it, circular drying clothesline or drying racks on the balconies of the second floors.
Oh, yeah.
Very distinctive.
Yeah, so the pink, so just remember, if you ever go into Map Tucson, pink is housing. Typically, when you click on a parcel as well, it'll tell you here that it's owned by the Department of Housing and the use is housing. But you may see times where that gets a little funky. And so, like I said, don't hold it to total actual fact all the time. But yeah, I think, what we discovered when I gave this presentation to leadership a year ago, we were really gung-ho with this idea of what we could develop on, city-owned vacant lots. And it was sort of like, crap, like maybe it's not as great as we thought it would be, but I still think there's opportunity. And I still think it's worth, we are keeping track of the inventory. And when we have opportunity to do some stuff, I think we try. So it's not to say that nothing can change or shift, but it's not as bright. And also, like I said too, that there's the HCD where we know we have complete control over, so we can set our own sort of priority and path for that. But there is other property that's owned by different departments, and that becomes, sort of the management level decision of how departments can work together or, go from there. So, so that's sort of my quick presentation, but I'll help answer any questions and talk through ideas and stuff.
Not to be totally nerded out, but I am at this point. If you looked in those pink things we were just looking at, and you see how structures that are offset, they're not north-south aligned, they're sort of 45-degree angle. I believe those are the old RFK homes.
Okay.
They were, as I recall now, having seen some of them on that view. So I think those were originally conventional. I think it was conventional public housing.
Cool. Okay.
So.
Any other questions for Sarah?
I had a couple, if that's okay.
Sure.
On that first presentation, Sarah, in the 5,000 to 10,000 square foot group, you noted there were 33 vacant lots owned by HCD, and there was kind of a note that 2 of those were developable. And there were 79 unassigned vacant lots. Is there any kind of assessment using similar criteria about what's developable there, or since those aren't HCD, those haven't been assessed? Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't take the time to really dive into it. It wasn't, it was sort of overstepping my lane, I guess, right? I like to jump out of my lane sometimes, but I didn't dive into it entirely to see it. It's a lot of work to go parcel by parcel, you know, to see what actually the zoning is, what the square footage is it in a floodplain, right? There's a lot of things to check off, but no, I did not. My point was to show how many exist, and if it was unassigned, I didn't do the deeper dive. I only did it for the HCD designated ones.
Gotcha. And on the 11K and up, 11,000 square foot and up one of the notes on that slide said potential to be developed. Similarly, I'm guessing there were, I think, 235 unassigned on that one. That's just something you'd have to really take a bunch of time and go through. Okay, manually. All right, that's all. Those were my only questions. Thank you for the presentation, though. The map Tucson, I've used it before to look at zoning and things, but it's sometimes tough to get your layers right to really get what you want out of it. So it's great having someone with experience that can do that and show us around that a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll say I'm always happy to do like training sessions, and you know, I think it's important to be transparent. Like, it's a public service to have this, you know, data available. And I did that in Colorado with the realtor groups, right? Like, they would always call and say, hey, how can I find this information? It's like, it's all really there. It's there for you. It's just, you have to be shown how to use it. And I think it's important. So always happy to answer questions about Map Tucson, or, you know, do tutorials if people want to get a little deeper into it.
Well, thank you. I hope nobody feels bad if they've gone there and had trouble with it. There's a learning curve, and Sarah makes it look a little bit easy, but I'm glad you're a resource for us on this. Thanks.
Commissioners, is there anything else for Sarah?
Looks like Mindy's got a question.
I do. Thank you, Sarah, for doing all the work. And it became clearer during this presentation that what I was actually asking for were empty lots that would have potential for development of a tiny home village, is where my thoughts had been.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, it's like the idea is like, oh, what vacant properties can we do this on? And I think the problem with land is that it's scarce. And so the city has some vacant land right now. That's, you know, it was like when we had the no-tell motel, there was a vacant lot next to it, but it had a development proposal prepared and ready to go. So it's sort of, most of the properties that we have that would be conducive to that use, right? Or you would think already have a development plan in line for it, because we're getting proactive. Like, you know, we have development plans for the lots that we know can be developed on. So to find the land that could be used for a tiny home village, I think I think we're at a point where now it's like, are there parcels that could be used that we could acquire? And then it becomes a funding issue. How are we going to get the money to acquire? And, you know, we still have some funding left to acquire properties. But yeah, I think, and, you know, we are you know, tasked with putting tiny homes behind Fire Station 8. So the Housing First Resource Center is in progress right now. Maybe Neto, make a note, but maybe we should come to the Housing First Subcommittee in January to present on like the pad and what's proposed and where we're at with that, because we're in the process of rezoning that per direction of mayor and council. And it's like, oh, we could put all these tiny homes in the back, but you know, once you start to really develop and design what that looks like, space becomes a difficult thing, and it's not as easy as it sounds to do it, other than if you want to literally just start and because we're still working within zoning constraints and stuff, right? So there's other jurisdictions that have done it, and we're working through how we can do that on Fire Station 8, but we're also looking at what other sites exist in the city. And I think for the city of Tucson owned properties, there's a few that may work for it, but they have already been sort of set in a queue for development that's building, you know, more permanent multifamily housing. So the tiny home thing is it, can we do a temporary? My thought is I want to figure out a way to do temporary on sites that are going to be developed. But I haven't come up with that proposal yet, because I think that's a great idea, but I want to flush out what that would look like. Can we really do a temporary use on sites before we go to develop them? And I think that's an interesting thing that could be done, but, you know, also that's just my idea. And I don't know if it would work with management and leadership and zoning and costs, right? Because that's also additional cost that's already been designated for a site that's being developed. So there's multiple things at play. But I think that there's passion to make this happen. And once we get Fire Station 8, as the intention of Fire Station 8 is to become hopefully replicable in some capacity, so that we show that this is how you can do it at this scale, but maybe there's a bigger site, and, you know, it could be redone at a different site by private folks, or if some opportunity comes up for a city-owned site for us to be able to do it.
Where's Station 8?
Fire Station 8 is up off of King Road, right off of Oracle, north of Prince. So King is the next road north of Prince, and it's just in off of Oracle. They built a new fire station on Prince. So they have a brand new, gorgeous fire station. And then the old fire station is gorgeous in its own 1960s way, and very tiny, compared to, you know, the needs that they have. So that has, you know, managed. So that's a perfect example of a department kind of giving ownership of a lot to a different department. So it was fire. It still shows as fire in the map, right? But we're working on HCD taking over that and using it for this Housing First Resource Center.
Thank you, Sarah. So Mark and Mindy, would you like that as an agenda item for the next meeting?
Sure.
Sure.
Would that meeting be in January, or will you guys have a meeting in December?
That's my next question for the commissioners. We do have a December 26th meeting scheduled. So okay, I'm seeing no's. So Neto, why don't we go ahead and take that agenda or that meeting time and date off?
Will do.
We will just not meet in December. Is this okay with the commissioners? Is this your request? Okay, very good. We're not going to have our December meeting. So the one after that would be the January meeting. And we would like that request on the agenda item. And I see Neto has already passed that on as a request, and I will reply yes. For the January meeting.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I am feeling a great urgency in getting shelter up for people that are homeless. I am seeing bigger encampments that have more plastic over them, more cardboard, more people needing homes. So that's where my energy is coming from. One of the, now that, you know, hearing what you've shared, Sarah, thank you. My brain just went to, what about city parks that are not being utilized? Like Estevan City Park on Stone Avenue, where I don't go there. I don't know how much it's used. Has that ever been discussed?
Not that I know of. I will say, I'll bring up a couple of things too, and this kind of ties to the staff presentation on Housing First stuff. And I just luckily went to the Tucson Pima Collaboration to End Homelessness Continuum of Care board meeting today. So I'm on that board now as just sort of the a developer type to sort of provide input from that perspective. But we just got an update today about HUD and Housing Central Command, and we have HUD technical assistance here in Tucson now that is here for 120 days doing like rapid sort of emergency response to homelessness work with us. They typically go to places that have natural disasters, right? So the guy who's here, he's been with HUD for 20 years. His first assignment was Katrina, and it was a disaster response to people unhoused from Katrina. So typically it's a Housing Central Command does like stuff in places that have had a natural disaster and have displacement from that. HUD has recently provided some resources to jurisdictions using that same sort of model, but to jurisdictions that just have a homeless problem, right? Like we are in crisis. We all know that. We see more and more, like you said, Mindy. So this is a sort of new effort. They've done a few, I think they started doing this in 2018. And so they have 6 jurisdictions before us that they've gone in and done this really quick, focused effort to get as many unsheltered people sheltered as fast as possible. That's their sort of method of action. So that's starting to, like, that basically started today. So we have HCC here. With that, we have our point in time count that's coming up in January. So it's that time of year again. So we'll be asking everybody to participate in the point in time count so we can understand what the need is, right? Because I think the first thing is to know, what do we need? And then start to do the things that we can do to start, housing people where they need to be housed and in the way that they will be housed best. The support, where are the supports, how can we do it? So there's a lot of push right now for just that. The tiny home village, I think, sounds like ideal, and we've seen good examples of it, but there's also other things that need to come in as well. We do need shelter, we do need other forms, shared housing options, etc. So all of that is being talked about at the TPCH, and definitely log on to the website, the Tucson Pima Collaboration to End Homelessness, and if you can sign up for alerts or whatever. I think it, and I'll talk to Austin and Elaine, who are the COC lead team on our staff, to see if they can also come and chat about that once they kind of get through it, because they're in it right now, right? So they're going to be really busy figuring out how we're going to make this all work, but that is happening as we speak. So it's good news that, don't think that there's nothing happening. There's definitely some momentum that just took place with this HUD giving. I think they've done it before too, where they didn't have money, but there's money that we got through they called it a special NOFO, notice of funding opportunity. So we call it the SNOFO, but through that we got, I love it. Winter Magic SNOFO, we got $7.8 million to work on this. And so a lot of it goes into the HMIS system, right? So the system that tracks our homeless management information system. That's what HMIS stands for. We have lots of different data around it. And so the Tucson Pima Collaboration to End Homelessness is working pretty steadfastly on a lot of this stuff and trying to help solve this problem. Because I think it's more than one tiny home village can handle. But once we know what we need, then maybe it's one plus another one plus some permanent supportive housing plus some other, real landlord outreach, etc. So it's going to be a lot of work, and it's multifaceted, but don't feel like it's that there's nothing happening. It's sort of my overall update.
Thank you.
I don't want to ask a question off agenda here, but as you're talking about future agendas and maybe having Austin or somebody come by and update us on this. If they're updating us afterwards, I guess they would be updating us on what the plan's going to be. Right now, I'm kind of curious if HUD's been doing this kind of effort in 6 other cities, what the result was in those cities and what resources, what the fruit of that was, whether that was just a plan or whether that was some funding dedicated to permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, whatever it was. So I'm curious about that. And if that's something we have to wait for and Austin gives us the whole rundown later, fine.
No.
That's
Yeah, that's a good question. And that question came up today. Like the board asked, we sort of got told this is what's happening. And so there were questions just like that from the board, right, to HUD. And basically what he sort of broke it down to is like when they were out, they've been talking to Tucson 6 months about this, right? They've already done a bunch of research and come up with who are all the players, what data do they have so far? When they were here, they visited the 100-acre wood encampment. And he was like, my direct, now what the first thing I'm going to want to see, like in the next 72 hours is when we went out there that day, how many people were talked to, how many people were housed, how many people are left, right?
Sarah, what's the wood encampment?
I just heard of, there's one encampment that he visited that was in existence. I don't know the details about the encampment. I don't work on that team or anything, but the point was they visited an encampment and they want to know who's been helped, where have they gone, and how many more there are, right? So it's not specific to that encampment, but it was more overall. They really are focused on if there's unhoused people, how do we get them to permanent housing? And that's sort of the main focus. That's the goal of HCC. So what I will do too is because I think they have a lot of this information that they're going to be releasing on the website as we move forward. So I'll share that link with you. And like I said, it just started today. So there's a lot of work that's come up to this point, and then their sort of rapid response is 120 days dedicated. It's not a plan. It's really like setting systematic like protocol, just helping us. Like one thing he said is Tucson has a lot of, we have a lot of already active programming happening, right? We have a lot of service providers already. We have the city, we have Housing First, we have OPCS, we have Primavera, we have a lot of service providers, but now it's sort of, how do we make sure that they're all working more together as opposed to just in the silo where they work or the things that they do. So I think they're really going to help us pull together a lot of that information. And this is all new for me. I just started sitting on this board. That was my second meeting. So I'm not the most well-versed, but I feel like it's important for you all in the Housing First subcommittee to know that it's happening and to kind of keep an eye out on the COC website and to see, what is the continuum of care doing and how are they working on these things. And I'm pretty sure, Joe, too, that you'll notice there might be opportunities for, input or things like that as we move through this next 120 days. But they really are, like I said, they're disaster relief, they're focused. He made that very clear today. Like, he's like, I told all the leadership and everybody, like, if you accept this support, like, then if I request a meeting from you tomorrow, then it might be just the next day, but we're not talking about next month for a half an hour. Like, they really are here to work and figure some things out in a very quick fashion for us.
Thank you, Sarah. So we won't be having the December meeting. The next meeting will be in March, and the full commission meeting will be on December 7th. With that is the end of all of our agenda items for today. Would we like to adjourn? Mark, Mindy?
What happened to January?
Yeah, we will have a January meeting.
Okay, good.
I don't have the date in front of me because the only one we had on the calendar was December 26th. That's no longer going to happen. All right, with that, we will adjourn.
Okay.
Right, thank you. Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Everyone.
Have a wonderful evening.